Monday, 11 o'clock a.m. The coffee was still warm when I found the termination notice on my desk. Brady Lawson must have dropped it there while I was grabbing my second cup from the break room. No ceremony, no courtesy call, just expensive company letterhead with my name typed across the middle like a death certificate. Effective immediately. HR downstairs, 27 years. Gone in 5 words. I'm Marcus Thompson. I'm 52 years old, and I just got fired from Thunder Automotive Solutions, the company I'd given most of my adult life to. The place where I'd built something that mattered, something that kept people safe on the roads, the auto-secure system, my baby, my legacy, my life's work. What Brady Lawson didn't know when he walked into my office at exactly 11 o'clock a.m. was that he'd just lit a fuse on a bomb that would explode in 96 hours and take his $420 million Stellantis merger with it. I checked my watch. My $180,000 performance bonus was scheduled to hit my account this Friday at 11 a.m. Brady probably thought he was pulling some NBA-level genius move, terminate the old guy before his big payday, save the company money, prove to Daddy and the board he could make tough decisions. What his Wharton education didn't teach him was to read the fine print on contracts written by men who'd survived decades in Detroit's automotive wars. That bonus wasn't just money, it was a trigger. See, 15 years ago, Frank Rodriguez, Thunder's founder and the closest thing to a father I'd had since my old man died, wrote a clause into my contract that nobody else knew about. Frank was former UAW Local 600, the kind of shop steward who'd go toe-to-toe with plant managers over safety violations and win. When he started Thunder after Ford's downsizing in the early 2000s, he brought that same fight-for-your-people mentality to the executive suite. The clause was elegant in its simplicity. Once my annual bonus paid, full legal ownership of the auto-secure system would automatically transfer to me. Not a symbolic gesture. Not a handshake deal. Full intellectual property rights, filed with the state, sitting in escrow, waiting for that electronic payment confirmation. And without auto-secure, Thunder had nothing to offer Stellantis except empty promises and Brady's PowerPoint presentations. I signed the termination paperwork without saying a word. My hands were steady. I'd been expecting this for months, ever since Richard Lawson brought his 28-year-old son in as VP of Strategic Development. The kid had been gunning for me since day one, probably saw my salary and thought about all the ways he could spend that money better. On my way out, I passed Brady's corner office. He was on the phone, gesturing animatedly through the glass walls, probably updating his father on the brilliant cost-cutting measure he'd just implemented. I left a small black USB drive on my desk where he could see it. Let him think it was important. That drive had been empty for 5 years. Every reel, backup, every line of critical auto-secure code, every security protocol that made our system worth $420 million to Stellantis. All of it was locked behind biometric encryption that only recognized my thumbprint and retinal scan. I walked through Thunder's lobby for the last time, past the wall of automotive industry awards we'd won for cybersecurity innovation, past the framed photos of Frank with 3 generations of Detroit auto executives, past the receptionist who'd been saying good morning to me for 8 years. She looked confused when I nodded goodbye. Outside in the February cold, I climbed into my F-150 and sat there for a minute, engine running, watching people walk in and out of the building where I'd spent more waking hours than in my own home. Detroit was having one of those gray winter days where the sky looks like it's pressing down on everything, the kind that makes you appreciate a warm truck cab and heated seats. In 96 hours, this would all be different. I drove home through streets I'd traveled for 27 years, past the Coney Island place where Frank and I used to grab chili dogs and argue about Lions draft picks, past the auto parts stores and repair shops that made up the ecosystem we served. These were my people. The mechanics and engineers and line workers who understood what it meant to build something with your hands and take pride in making it right. Linda was at the kitchen table when I walked in, grading geometry tests from her students at Cody High School. She looked up from a stack of papers covered in red ink and took one look at my face. Let me guess. Brady? Brady. What's his excuse this time? I handed her the termination notice. She read it twice, her jaw getting tighter each time. That little... She caught herself, glanced toward the living room where our 8-year-old granddaughter Emma was watching cartoons. That little prince thinks he can just throw away 27 years? Linda's been my wife for 26 years. She taught high school math through the auto industry's worst crashes, watched me work 16-hour days during crisis after crisis, supported every career decision even when it meant missing family dinners and weekend plans. She'd earned the right to be angry. "He thinks he's saving money," I said. "Cut me loose before my bonus pays Friday." "How much money are we talking about?" $180,000. She whistled low. "That's college tuition for Emma when she's ready." Was college tuition. Linda studied my face. After 26 years, she could read me like one of her algebra textbooks. But there's something else, isn't it? That look you get when your 3 moves ahead in chess. I poured myself a cup of coffee from the pot she'd made, added cream the way I'd been doing every morning for 2 decades. Through the kitchen window, I could see the bird feeder Linda had hung last spring, covered in snow but still attracting the cardinals and blue jays that reminded us both why we loved this old house in Dearborn Heights. Remember Frank's retirement party? The speech he gave about protecting what we built? The one where he got emotional talking about legacy and the UAW guys who taught him to fight for working people? He didn't just mean thunder. He meant the work, the auto-secure system. He wrote a clause into my contract 15 years ago that nobody else knows about. Linda set down her red pen and gave me her full attention. This was her classroom voice, the one that meant she was about to learn something important. "What kind of clause, Marcus?" Monday, 2:30 p.m. Linda set down her coffee mug harder than necessary. "What kind of clause?" "The kind that transfers full ownership of AutoSecure to me the moment my bonus clears." She blinked. "Come again?" "Friday at 11 a.m., when that $180,000 hits my account, I become the legal owner of every line of code, every patent, every licensing agreement tied to the AutoSecure system. Not Thunder, me. And without that system, Stellantis has no reason to pay $420 million for Thunder. The merger dies." Linda leaned back in her chair, processing. Outside, I could hear Emma laughing at whatever cartoon was on, the sound echoing off our kitchen walls the same way Michael and Sarah's laughter had 15 years ago when they were little. "Marcus, that's..." She paused. "That's Frank's entire legacy you're talking about." Frank knew exactly what he was doing. We were at Buddy's Pizza on 8 Mile after pulling an all-nighter fixing a security breach for Ford. This was 2009, right after the bailout, when nobody knew if the auto industry would survive. Frank looked exhausted, older than his 58 years. I could still picture him across that red vinyl booth, sleeves rolled up, tiger's cap askew, talking between bites of Detroit-style pizza about the future of automotive cybersecurity. He said something I'll never forget. "Marcus, I've seen too many good companies get gutted by people who don't understand what makes them valuable. Look what happened to Visteon, to Delphi. When I'm gone, I want to make sure the work we're doing can't be destroyed by some MBA who thinks everything's just numbers on a spreadsheet." "So he wrote you into the contract as a failsafe." "Exactly. The transfer agreement's been sitting in escrow for 15 years, waiting for the right trigger. Frank figured if anyone ever tried to push me out before I was ready to retire, they'd learn real quick why that was a mistake." Linda shook her head slowly. "Brady has no idea what he just did. None. And in about 6 hours, when Stellantis starts asking questions about key personnel continuity, he's going to find out the hard way." I went upstairs to my home office and powered up my workstation. The familiar hum of the servers I'd built over the years filled the room like a mechanical heartbeat. On the main screen, I pulled up a countdown timer and set it for Friday, 11 a.m. Red numbers appeared. 95 hours, 28 minutes, 14 seconds. Then I did something I'd been preparing for since the day Frank explained the clause to me. I opened a secure partition on my system and accessed the automated protocols I'd built years ago. Insurance, Frank had called it. A dead man's switch for the digital age. The first protocol was an email scheduler. If the AutoSecure licensing rights weren't renewed by Friday at 11 a.m., and they couldn't be without me as an active Thunder employee, an automated message would send to 3 key people at Stellantis. Catherine Walsh, their lead counsel, Thomas Mitchell, CEO of Stellantis North America, and David Park, their chief technology officer who'd personally approved the AutoSecure integration. The message was simple and professional. As of Friday, February 16th at 11 a.m., Thunder Automotive Solutions no longer holds valid licensing rights to the AutoSecure protocol central to the Stellantis merger integration. Please review Section 12 of the merger agreement regarding key personnel continuity requirements. Section 12. The clause that listed 3 Thunder employees as essential personnel whose departure before merger completion would trigger renegotiation rights for Stellantis. My name was first on that list. Brady had signed the merger agreement 8 months ago in a ceremonial press conference at the Marriott Renaissance Center, probably never reading past the executive summary. The second protocol was more subtle. Every major automotive news outlet, Automotive News, Ward's Auto, even the Free Press Business Desk, would receive an anonymous tip about personnel changes at Thunder Automotive affecting the Stellantis merger. Nothing specific, nothing that could be traced back to me, just enough to get reporters asking questions that Brady couldn't answer. I sat back and watched the countdown tick down. 95 hours, 26 minutes, 8 seconds. My phone buzzed with a text message. Alex Rodriguez, one of our senior engineers. I'd been mentoring Alex for 5 years, ever since he graduated from Wayne State with a computer engineering degree, and the kind of hunger to learn that reminded me of myself at his age. His parents had come up from Texas during the auto boom of the 90s, and Alex carried that mix of Midwestern work ethic and Latino family values that made him one of our most reliable people. Mr. Thompson, heard what happened. This is wrong. Can we talk? I called him back immediately. Alex, you don't waste time. Sir, Brady's been asking questions about auto-secure architecture all afternoon. He had IT trying to access your secured directories. Did they get in? Not even close. But he's panicking. Started talking about bringing in outside consultants, maybe reaching out to competitors to license similar systems. That was interesting. Brady was already looking for alternatives, which meant he was smart enough to realize Thunder's value proposition depended entirely on auto-secure. What did you tell him? That auto-secure isn't just software, it's an integrated hardware-software solution with proprietary encryption protocols. You can't just swap it out like changing brake pads. Alex was smart, too smart to stay at Thunder much longer under Brady's leadership. Good answer. Alex, I want you to know something. Whatever happens in the next few days, you've got a bright future in this industry. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise. Sir, are you saying what I think you're saying? I'm saying, keep your options open. After we hung up, I realized Alex would be getting a call soon. Brady would need someone to take over my responsibilities, at least temporarily. Alex was the obvious choice. Young, talented, technically capable. Brady would probably offer him a promotion, maybe even my old title. I hoped Alex was smart enough to ask the right questions before accepting. Tuesday, 6:15 a.m. I woke up before my alarm, the way I'd been doing for 27 years. Old habits from the Navy die hard. Linda was still asleep, so I went downstairs quietly and made coffee. The house felt different somehow. Lighter, maybe. Or maybe that was just me. Outside our kitchen window, I could see Mrs. Kowalski across the street scraping ice off her Buick's windshield. She'd been our neighbor for 12 years, a retired Ford secretary who still drove to Mass every morning at St. Alphonsus. Normal people doing normal things while my professional world was about to implode. My phone had 2 missed calls from unknown numbers and 3 unread emails. I deleted the voicemails without listening. The emails were from reporters, Detroit Free Press, Crane's Detroit Business, and someone from Reuters who'd somehow gotten my personal address. The countdown on my computer read 76 hours, 45 minutes, 22 seconds. I was halfway through my first cup of Folgers. Linda bought it because it reminded her of her dad, and I'd grown to love it, when my email chimed. A message from Rebecca Martinez at Automotive News. The subject line read, Thunder Automotive Personnel Changes. Request for comment. Rebecca's email was professional but direct. Mr. Thompson, I've received information suggesting recent personnel changes at Thunder Automotive related to the pending Stellantis merger. Industry sources indicate these changes may affect technical integration timelines. Would you be available for a brief phone conversation to discuss the potential impact? I replied with one sentence. I'd suggest asking Thunder's leadership team about Section 12 compliance and essential personnel requirements. That was all it would take. Rebecca was a good reporter, the kind who actually read SEC filings and merger agreements instead of just copying press releases. She'd find Section 12, cross-reference it with the personnel changes, and start asking uncomfortable questions. My phone rang at 8 o'clock a.m. sharp. Tuesday, 8 o'clock a.m. Catherine Walsh from Stellantis. I recognized the Auburn Hills area code before I answered. Mr. Thompson, thank you for taking my call. I'm lead counsel for Stellantis North America. We've had some questions raised about the Thunder merger, specifically regarding key personnel requirements. I kept my voice neutral. Section 12? You're familiar with it. I should be. My name's first on the list. A pause. Yes, it is. Mr. Thompson, there seems to be some confusion about your current employment status with Thunder. Our records show you as essential personnel for the integration, but we've received conflicting information. What kind of conflicting information? A reporter called this morning asking about personnel changes affecting the merger timeline. When we contacted Thunder for clarification, we were told you were no longer with the company as of yesterday. I let that hang in the air for a moment. That's accurate. Mr. Thompson, if you're no longer employed by Thunder, that creates substantial complications for the merger agreement. Section 12 specifically states that essential personnel departures trigger renegotiation rights. I'm familiar with the language. Then you understand our position. We need to verify the current status of all licensing agreements tied to essential personnel, particularly the auto-secure system. You'll need to ask Thunder for those certifications. They're having difficulty locating the current certificates. I almost smiled. Brady was probably tearing apart filing cabinets right now, looking for documents that didn't exist where he thought they should. That's unfortunate. Mr. Thompson, I'll be direct. Stellantis has invested 14 months and considerable resources in this merger based on representations about Thunder's capabilities. If there are issues with the auto-secure licensing, Ms. Walsh, I can't speak for Thunder's current licensing status. I'm no longer an employee. After we hung up, I sat back and watched the countdown timer. 74 hours, 12 minutes, 33 seconds. Instead of waiting for more calls, I decided to take a different approach. I opened my laptop and composed a detailed email to Gerald Pierce, Thunder's longest-serving board member and the guy who'd been there since Frank founded the company. Gerald, I assume you're hearing from Stellantis about Section 12 compliance issues. As you know, my departure triggers certain contractual obligations that may affect Thunder's licensing arrangements. If the board wants to discuss options before Friday's deadline, I'm available, but not through Brady. Marcus. I sent it and waited. Tuesday, 11:30 a.m. Linda found me in my office, staring at the countdown timer while listening to WJR's morning talk show, something I hadn't had time to do in years. "How are you feeling?" she asked. "Honestly, different than I expected. I thought I'd be angrier. Instead, I just feel tired, like I've been holding my breath for 27 years and finally let it out." She sat down in the chair across from my desk, the one where employees used to sit when they needed help with impossible problems. "Your chest been bothering you?" I touched my sternum reflexively. The tightness had been there for months, stress manifesting in ways my 52-year-old body couldn't ignore anymore. A little, nothing serious. "Marcus, remember what Dr. Singh said at your last checkup? The prediabetes, the blood pressure? He said you needed to reduce stress before it becomes something worse." "I remember. Do you?" "Because I've been hearing promises about slowing down for 3 years. You still take calls during Emma's birthday parties. You still work weekends when we're supposed to be together." She was right. I'd missed too many family dinners, too many school plays, too many moments that mattered because some system was down or some client was panicking. This is different, Linda. This is about protecting what Frank built. Is it? Or is it about proving to yourself that 27 years meant something? That hit closer to home than I wanted to admit. Part of me, maybe a big part, needed to see Brady fail. Needed him to understand the magnitude of what he'd thrown away with his casual cruelty. Maybe both. Then finish it. But when this is over, when that timer hits 0 and whatever's going to happen happens, you're done. Really done. No more midnight calls, no more weekend emergencies, no more choosing work over family. Deal. My phone buzzed with Gerald's response. "Conference call set for 2 p.m. Richard will be there. We need solutions, not problems." Tuesday, 2:00 p.m. The conference call was tense from the first minute. Richard Lawson sounded like he'd aged 10 years since yesterday. "Marcus, first I want to apologize for Brady's actions. They were inexcusable." "Apology accepted, Richard." Gerald jumped in. "Marcus, we need to know exactly what we're dealing with. Stellantis is asking for documentation we can't locate. Their lawyers are using words like material breach and contract termination. The auto-secure licensing certificates are in a secure partition tied to my employee credentials. When my access was terminated yesterday, the system automatically locked down. Can you unlock it? I could. But that would require me to be reinstated as an employee, which would contradict the termination Brady signed yesterday. Richard cleared his throat. What if we offered you a consulting contract? Temporary, just to get us through the merger? At what rate? We were thinking $2,000 a day. I did the math quickly. The merger was supposed to close in 6 weeks. Even at $2,000 a day for 42 days, it wouldn't approach the value of what I'd own outright in 2 days. Richard, that's generous, but it doesn't solve the underlying problem, which is, Brady fired me to save $180,000. But my bonus payment isn't just compensation, it's contractually linked to intellectual property transfer rights that Frank negotiated 15 years ago. Dead silence on the call. Gerald finally spoke. Intellectual property transfer to who? To me. Personally. Marcus, Richard said carefully, are you saying that if your bonus pays Friday morning, you'll own AutoSecure? I'm saying Frank was very thorough about protecting the company's core assets from hostile takeover or incompetent management. More silence. Then Gerald, Jesus Christ, Frank, what did you do? Wednesday, 10 a.m. Thunder's stock opened down 15% from Monday's close. The financial media was starting to pay attention. CNBC ran a segment called Merger Monday Blues that mentioned personnel disruptions at several automotive companies, with Thunder specifically cited. By noon, the stock had dropped another 8%. Total decline, approximately 22% in 2 days. My phone rang. Alex Rodriguez. Mr. Thompson, I wanted you to know something. Brady offered me your old position yesterday. Chief Technology Officer, $220,000 salary. Congratulations. I turned it down. That surprised me. Why? Because when I asked him basic questions about auto-secure architecture, he couldn't answer them. He kept saying we'd figure it out during transition. A CTO job where I can't get straight answers about our core product. That's not a promotion. That's a setup for failure. What did you tell him? That I don't work for titles. I work for people who understand the technology they're responsible for. My father didn't come up from San Antonio and work the Ford Rouge plant for 20 years, so I could take jobs from people who don't respect the work. Something loosened in my chest. Alex understood what this was really about. Respect for the craft, for the knowledge, for the years it takes to build something meaningful. Alex, that was the right call. Sir, can I ask you something? Ask away. Is Thunder going to survive this merger? I looked at the countdown timer. 46 hours, 18 minutes, 3 seconds. That depends entirely on decisions made in the next 2 days. But Alex, whatever happens, you're going to be fine. You've got the skills and the character to succeed anywhere. Thank you, sir. That means more than you know. After we hung up, I realized something had shifted. This wasn't just about Brady anymore, or even about my own vindication. It was about people like Alex, who deserved to work for companies that valued their contributions, instead of seeing them as line items on a spreadsheet. Wednesday, 4:30 p.m. An email arrived from Thomas Mitchell, CEO of Stellantis North America. Mr. Thompson, Stellantis is prepared to discuss alternative arrangements for auto-secure licensing that don't depend on Thunder's corporate structure. Would you be available for a confidential conversation? T. Mitchell. The countdown read 42 hours, 30 minutes, 15 seconds. I stared at that email for 10 minutes before responding with a single line. I'll be available Friday after 11 o'clock a.m. Thursday, 6:30 a.m. I woke up to the sound of my phone buzzing against the nightstand. Linda stirred beside me but didn't wake up. The caller ID showed Gerald Pierce. Marcus, we need to talk. Good morning, Gerald. The board held an emergency session last night that went until 2 a.m. Brady's been suspended pending review. Richard is, well, let's just say he's having a hard time with his son's decisions. I'm sorry to hear that. Are you? Because from where I sit, it looks like you orchestrated this entire situation. Gerald wasn't wrong. Frank had given me the tools 15 years ago, but I'd chosen to use them. Gerald, Brady fired me to save $180,000. What happened after that was just business responding to contractual realities. Just business? Marcus, you nearly destroyed a company that employs 847 people, people with families, mortgages, kids in college. That stung because it was true. In my focus on Brady's arrogance, I'd lost sight of everyone else who would be affected by Thunder's collapse. The employees weren't my target, but their collateral damage. And that matters. I sat up in bed, careful not to wake Linda. Through the bedroom window, I could see frost covering our neighbor's lawn, the kind of February morning that makes Detroit feel like the edge of the world. What are you proposing? Come back. Not as an employee, as a consultant. Help us through the Stellantis transition. But I need to know, can you actually transfer those licensing rights back to Thunder? I looked at my phone. The countdown timer read 28 hours, 30 minutes, 12 seconds. The transfer happens automatically when my bonus clears Friday morning. After that, I own AutoSecure outright. But ownership doesn't mean I can't license it back to Thunder. At what terms? That depends. Is Brady permanently out? The board will make that decision Friday morning. But given the circumstances, yes, I think Brady's done. Then we can talk. Thursday, 2:00 p.m. Linda found me in the backyard, sitting on the old picnic table Frank had helped me build 10 years ago, watching Emma build a snow fort with the neighbors' kids. Their laughter carried across the frozen yard like music. Penny, for your thoughts? Just thinking about what Frank would want me to do. She sat down beside me, close enough that I could smell her shampoo, the same brand she'd used since we were first married. And what's that? Protect the work and the people who do it, but not necessarily the company. What's the difference? The company is just a legal structure. The work, AutoSecure, the technology, the innovation, that's bigger than Thunder. Frank always said the work would outlive all of us. Emma waved at us from her snow fort, her cheeks red with cold but her smile bright as summer. She's going to need college money in 10 years, Linda said quietly. I know, and we're going to need health care when we retire. I know that too. So whatever you decide tomorrow, decide it with a clear head, not just your heart. That evening, Thomas Mitchell called personally. Mr. Thompson, I wanted to follow up on my email. Stellantis is prepared to offer you a direct consulting agreement for AutoSecure development and deployment. 3-year contract, $8 million total compensation. I nearly dropped the phone. $8 million was more money than I'd make in the rest of my career at Thunder. That's generous. You built something remarkable. We want to make sure it continues to evolve. What about Thunder? Thunder would receive a licensing fee for existing deployments, but future development would be handled through your consulting firm. I thought about Gerald's words, about the 847 people at Thunder, about Alex Rodriguez turning down Brady's offer because he believed in doing things right. Mr. Mitchell, let me ask you something. Would this consulting arrangement include bringing on additional technical personnel? People I'd want to work with? Absolutely. We'd want you to build a team. Then let's schedule a formal conversation for Friday afternoon. Friday, 10:00 a.m. I stood in Thunder's lobby for the first time since Monday, visitor's badge clipped to my jacket. The receptionist smiled nervously when she saw me. Mr. Thompson, they're waiting for you in conference room A. Gerald was there, along with Richard Lawson and 3 other board members I recognized. Thomas Mitchell had driven down from Auburn Hills. The tension in the room was thick enough to cut with a knife. Richard stood when I walked in. He looked like he'd aged 5 years in 5 days. Marcus, I owe you an apology. Brady's actions were inexcusable. The board voted unanimously this morning. His employment is terminated, effective immediately. I'm sorry it came to that. Are you? Because I'm not sure my son learned anything from this except that his father can't protect him from his mistakes. That was harder to hear than I expected. Richard was a good man who'd built Thunder into something meaningful after Frank retired. He didn't deserve to watch his son destroy it. Thomas Mitchell got straight to business. Mr. Thompson, we need to know the current status of AutoSecure licensing. Can you restore Thunder's access? I opened my laptop and logged into the secure partition I'd created years ago. My watch showed 10:58 a.m., 2 minutes until my bonus cleared. I can transfer the licensing rights back to Thunder, I said. But I have some conditions. Name them, Gerald said. First, Alex Rodriguez gets promoted to Chief Technology Officer immediately. He understands the AutoSecure architecture better than anyone except me, and he has the character to lead technical development responsibly. Done. Second, Thunder establishes a technical mentorship program. No more critical systems depending on single points of failure. Richard nodded. That makes sense. Third, I'll consult on the Stellantis integration for 6 months. Part-time, mostly remote. After that, I'm retired. Agreed. My phone buzzed at exactly 11 a.m. Bank notification, $180,000 deposited to checking account. The countdown timer on my laptop flashed green and displayed transfer complete. I owned AutoSecure for about 30 seconds. I pulled up the licensing transfer interface and typed in Thunder's corporate credentials. Another biometric scan, another transfer. Authorization. Thunder Automotive Solutions now holds full licensing rights to the AutoSecure system, I announced. The relief in the room was palpable. However, I continued. I've also accepted Thomas Mitchell's consulting offer for future AutoSecure development. Thunder will handle current deployments and Stellantis integration. My team will work on next-generation systems. I looked around the room. Everybody wins. Thunder keeps the merger. Stellantis gets their technology. The employees keep their jobs. And I get to retire on my own terms. Friday, 7 p.m. Linda and I sat on our back porch despite the February cold, sharing a Bell's Two-Hearted Ale and watching the sun set over Detroit's skyline. Emma was inside, video calling with her parents about the snow fort she'd built. "How does it feel?" Linda asked. "Different than I expected. I thought I'd feel more vindicated. Instead, I just feel relieved." Good relieved or bad relieved? Good relieved. Like I finally put down something heavy I'd been carrying for years. My phone had been quiet all afternoon. No crisis calls, no emergency meetings, no systems failures requiring immediate attention. For the first time in 27 years, Thunder's problems weren't my problems. "What are you going to do with 6 months of part-time consulting?" Train Alex. Document everything. Build a team that can innovate without me. Make sure what Frank and I built can survive and grow. And after that, we go to Wisconsin. We spend a month on the lake. I teach Emma how to fish properly. I remember what it feels like to wake up without a countdown timer in my head. Linda smiled and leaned against my shoulder. "Think Brady learned anything from this? Maybe. He's 28. People can change if they want to. Richard's a good father. He'll make sure Brady gets another chance to do better. You sound almost sympathetic. Frank always said everyone deserves a chance to learn from their mistakes, even MBA kids who make bad decisions under pressure." In my pocket, my phone buzzed once with a text message from Alex Rodriguez. "Thank you, sir. I won't let you down." I smiled and put the phone away without responding. Alex didn't need my approval anymore. He'd earned his shot. The countdown was over. For the first time in decades, time belonged to me again. From inside the house, I could hear Emma laughing at something on her video call, the sound mixing with the distant hum of Detroit traffic and the gentle creak of the porch swing Linda and I had installed 15 years ago. Some things, I realized, were worth more than any merger, any system, any 27-year career. Some things were worth coming home to, and some lessons are worth learning the hard way, even if you're not the one who has to learn them. "Stand up right now and apologize to my son for your sabotage or clean out your desk." William Blackstone's voice cut through the boardroom like a blade, his finger pointing directly at me across the mahogany table. The 12 board members and senior staff sat in dead silence, waiting for my response. Andrew Blackstone, William's 32-year-old son and our newly promoted VP of Strategy, smirked from his chair beside the executive team. "My name is Michael Thompson, I'm 48 years old, and that moment proved my 22 years as Chief Operations Manager at Apex Defense Technologies meant nothing to the Blackstone family. So let me back up and tell you how this whole mess started 10 months ago. Back then, I was running operations with a team of 16 solid engineers and technicians. We specialized in aerospace manufacturing for defense contracts, and I knew every rivet, every specification, every safety protocol by heart. After serving 12 years as a Marine sergeant and working my way up from the shop floor, I'd earned respect through actual work, not family connections. Then William hired his son, Andrew. First day on the job, Andrew rolled up in a brand new Tesla Model S, wearing a custom suit that cost more than most of my guys made in a month. He had an MBA from Stanford and exactly 0 real-world aerospace experience. According to William, Andrew was there to modernize our operations and bring innovative cost management to an aging workforce. Red flag number one. But I figured every boss's kid deserves a chance to prove themselves. Michael, you'll be mentoring Andrew, William announced during our department meeting. Show him our processes. He's got some fresh ideas about optimizing efficiency. Andrew's first fresh idea was cutting our materials testing protocols by 50% to accelerate production schedules. When I explained that aerospace contracts require specific safety certifications, he waved me off. Look, Mike, I understand you're comfortable with traditional methods, but we need to embrace lean manufacturing principles. My father expects measurable improvements, not status quo thinking. That's when I realized we had a serious problem. This wasn't just nepotism. This was dangerous nepotism applied to aircraft component manufacturing. Now here's where things get interesting. My son Danny is serving as an Air Force crew chief on C-130s right now. He's the guy who signs off on whether those birds are safe to fly. So when some MBA kid starts talking about cutting corners on aircraft parts, it's not just about business for me, it's about bringing my boy home alive. The real trouble started 2 months after Andrew joined when we landed the North Star Aerospace contract. Worth $350 million over 4 years, it was the biggest deal in our company's 28-year history. The contract specified manufacturing wing structural components using titanium grade 5 with specific heat treatment requirements and stress testing standards. Andrew was assigned to lead the cost analysis phase while I handled technical specifications. His initial reports showed production costs that would save $28 million across the entire contract duration. When I questioned the numbers, he got defensive. Maybe you're not seeing the optimization opportunities here, Mike. I've identified several process improvements that could increase our profit margins by 12% while maintaining quality standards. So I took his report home that night and went through it line by line. What I found made my blood run cold. Andrew had systematically replaced titanium grade 5 specifications with aluminum 6x61, eliminated heat treatment cycles, and reduced stress testing from 3 samples per batch to 1 sample per production run. These weren't optimizations. They were fundamental alterations that would produce wing components 65% weaker than contract requirements. Andrew, these changes violate basic metallurgy principles. Aluminum alloy can't provide the stress resistance that titanium delivers. Pilots will die if this equipment fails in flight. That's your interpretation. My analysis shows aluminum can meet performance requirements at significant cost savings. My father agrees we need to think strategically about profit margins. I scheduled an emergency meeting with William the next morning. Michael, I appreciate your concerns, but Andrew has identified legitimate opportunities for improvement. His cost projections show we can increase profit margins by 12% while meeting all technical specifications. I spread the engineering reports across his desk. William, these aren't improvements. These are material substitutions that will fail FAA inspection and violate federal contract terms. We'll face criminal fraud charges if we submit equipment that doesn't match approved specifications. William leaned back in his leather chair. I think you're being overly conservative. Andrew has advanced business training from one of the top MBA programs in the country. He understands strategic optimization better than traditional approaches. Look, William, I don't care what school he went to. Aluminum melts at 12 and 20 degrees, while titanium maintains structural integrity until 3,000 degrees. The tensile strength of grade 5 titanium is 130,000 psi. Aluminum 6061 tops out at 45,000 psi. No MBA program changes basic physics. William's expression hardened. Michael, I'm going to say this once. Andrew represents the future direction of this company. If you can't adapt to new methodologies, then perhaps it's time to consider whether you're the right fit for our evolving organization. The threat was clear. Accept Andrew's dangerous modifications or find another job. Over the following 3 months, things escalated rapidly. Andrew started attending my engineering meetings uninvited, contradicting my technical decisions with cost-saving alternatives. He'd send emails to our Pentagon procurement contacts with revised specifications, copying me as if I'd approved the changes. When federal inspectors asked technical questions during site visits, Andrew would defer to me, then later blame any confusion on my unclear communication style. 3 of my best engineers, Tony Castellano, James Rodriguez, and Paul Manning, requested transfers to other departments. Not because they'd lost confidence in my abilities, but because Andrew had made it clear that association with resistant personnel would impact their career advancement opportunities. My team shrank from 16 engineers to 13, while Andrew's influence expanded throughout the organization. The breaking point came during preparation for the major FAA compliance review scheduled for November 15th. I'd spent 2 weeks documenting why Andrew's material substitutions would compromise safety and violate contract specifications. The night before our presentation, I was working late when I heard voices from the main conference room. "Dad, what happens if the FAA asks technical questions I can't answer tomorrow?" "Don't worry, Andrew. I've already briefed the procurement team that Michael has been resistant to efficiency improvements. If there are any technical issues during the presentation, we'll frame them as his failure to provide adequate documentation support." I stopped outside the conference room door and activated my phone's recording function. But what if they want to see the original engineering specifications? Andrew's original specifications reflect outdated, overly conservative approaches that would make us non-competitive. Your analysis demonstrates we can meet all critical requirements while improving profitability. Trust me, after tomorrow's presentation, you'll be leading this entire department. That conversation changed everything. This wasn't incompetence or even standard corporate politics. This was deliberate fraud, and they were planning to destroy my career to cover their tracks. Time to fight back. I started documenting everything the next morning. Every email, every meeting, every conversation. I kept backup copies of all original engineering reports and compared them with Andrew's modified versions. The differences were staggering. He'd gone through and changed every spec we had, eliminated crucial safety tests, and reduced inspection requirements across 23 different contract items. The most dangerous change involved the wing components. My original specifications called for titanium grade 5 with Rockwell hardness of 2832 HRC after heat treatment requirements. Andrew's aluminum would provide approximately 65% less stress resistance than required titanium components. Pilots would die if this equipment failed in flight, including potentially my son Danny. But I needed more than technical documentation. I needed proof of criminal intent. The FAA compliance review was scheduled for the following Tuesday. William announced that Andrew would present our cost analysis while I handled the technical presentation. "Your role is to provide documentation. Support if requested," William informed me during our Monday morning meeting. "William, the FAA team will have specific questions about metallurgy, stress analysis, and fatigue testing protocols. Andrew doesn't have the engineering background to answer those technical inquiries. He has my complete confidence. That should be sufficient." I understood the setup. They were positioning Andrew to fail during the presentation, then blame me for inadequate technical support. Classic scapegoat strategy. That evening I stayed late again. Sure enough, William and Andrew were in the conference room preparing for Tuesday's presentation. I positioned myself outside the door with my phone ready. "Just follow the presentation outline," William was instructing. "If they ask technical questions you can't answer, explain that Michael was responsible for engineering briefings but failed to provide comprehensive documentation." What if they want to see the original specifications? There are no original specifications. Michael's analysis was incomplete and overly conservative for modern manufacturing standards. Your cost optimization study represents our official engineering position. I had it all recorded. But something Tony Castellano told me the next day made the situation much worse. Now Tony wasn't just any engineer. He was our union rep and a former Navy machinist who'd worked his way up from the shop floor just like me. We'd grabbed coffee together plenty of times over the years, talking about everything from deployment stories to raising kids. "Mike, we need to talk. Not here at the office. Can you meet me at Murphy's Diner on Route 9 tonight at 8? Murphy's was a 24-hour truck stop 15 miles from the office. Tony was already there when I arrived, sitting in a back corner booth with a folder and a concerned expression. "We have a serious problem," he said without preamble. "William's been monitoring your computer activity, your emails, your phone calls from the office. He's been building a surveillance file on you for the past 2 months. Tony opened the folder and showed me activity logs. My stomach dropped as I saw the extent of the monitoring. Every document I'd accessed, every email I'd sent, every phone call I'd made from my office extension, all logged and tracked. How is this legal? Technically, company equipment allows for monitoring. But here's the concerning part." He turned to another page. "Ashley Blackstone has been recording conversations throughout the building. Not just casual workplace discussions, formal meetings, private phone calls, confidential discussions with other employees. The page showed a directory of audio files organized by date and participant names. My name appeared in dozens of entries. This goes beyond normal corporate surveillance. Ashley's been systematically collecting information on anyone William considers a potential threat, including Colonel Patricia Hendricks, our primary board member. What kind of information on Patricia? Financial records, private communications, details about her military pension. William's been building leverage files on the entire board of directors. I stared at the surveillance data. This wasn't just nepotism or fraud. This was systematic corporate espionage designed to maintain control through blackmail and intimidation. Tony, why are you showing me this? Because you're not the first target. Over the past 3 years, William has systematically pushed out 4 other senior managers who questioned his decisions. He replaces experienced personnel with family loyalists, then uses surveillance data to control anyone who objects to his methods. What happened to the other managers? Thomas Anderson from Quality Control was forced out after William discovered personal financial problems and threatened to report them to federal security clearance authorities. Lisa Martinez from Procurement quit after Ashley recorded her complaining about Andrew's inexperience, then William threatened to sue her for creating a hostile work environment. Tony closed the folder. William doesn't just fire people who oppose him. He destroys their careers and ensures they can't find work elsewhere in the aerospace industry. What do you want me to do? Fight back. But you'll need more than engineering reports and recorded conversations. You'll need someone with enough influence to challenge William directly. That's when Tony told me about Colonel Patricia Hendricks's background. She wasn't just our biggest board member, she was a former Air Force procurement officer with 15 years' experience in defense contract oversight. More importantly, she maintained active security clearances and ongoing relationships throughout the Pentagon procurement system. Patricia has been asking questions about our recent performance metrics. She's noticed discrepancies between reported costs and actual deliverables. I think she suspects something is wrong, but she doesn't have concrete evidence. Can you arrange a meeting? Already done. Tomorrow, 2 p.m. at Riverside Coffee downtown. She thinks you're briefing her on technical specifications for her investment review. I drove home that night with my head spinning. William's operation was more sophisticated and dangerous than I'd realized. He wasn't just covering up Andrew's incompetence. He was running a systematic scheme to defraud the FAA while eliminating anyone who might expose the truth. But now I had allies. Tony controlled the union connections, Patricia had Pentagon relationships, and I had documented evidence of fraud. The next 48 hours would determine whether we could stop this conspiracy or whether William would succeed in destroying all of us. Colonel Patricia Hendricks wasn't what I expected. At 55, she looked more like a retired college professor than a major aerospace industry board member. But when she studied my engineering documentation at Riverside Coffee the next afternoon, her questions revealed the sharp mind of someone who understood both Pentagon procurement and corporate fraud. Michael, these material substitutions aren't just cost-cutting measures. They're systematic contract violations that could result in federal criminal charges. She compared Andrew's modified specifications with my original reports. If these altered specifications were submitted to FAA procurement, we're looking at conspiracy to defraud the government. William believes he can control the investigation through surveillance and pressure tactics. He's miscalculated. Patricia pulled out her own folder. I maintain active relationships throughout Pentagon procurement. More importantly, I've been monitoring concerning trends in this company's performance metrics for the past 6 months. She handed me a financial analysis. Delivery schedules have slipped 23% since Andrew joined the organization. Quality control reports show increasing deviation from contract specifications. Most troubling, our profit margins have increased while our actual material costs should be rising due to inflation. You think William's been manipulating financial reports beyond just the North Star contract? I think this fraud extends much deeper than material substitutions on a single contract. She pointed to specific numbers. Andrew's efficiency improvements have supposedly saved $28 million across 8 different Pentagon contracts over the past 4 months. That level of cost reduction is impossible without compromising quality or violating specifications. The numbers were damning. No legitimate engineering improvements could generate those savings without fundamental changes to materials, processes, or safety protocols. Patricia, what do you need from me? Complete documentation of all specification changes, recorded evidence of criminal intent, and testimony from other employees who've witnessed this fraud. Can you provide those? I have recorded conversations between William and Andrew planning to blame me for their specification violations. Tony has documented their surveillance operation, but we'll need more than just my word against theirs. Leave that to me. I have contacts who can arrange for an unannounced FAA compliance audit, but we need to be prepared for William's counterattack. That's when Patricia explained William's leverage strategy. He'd been collecting compromising information on board members, investors, and senior staff for years. Financial difficulties, personal problems, professional disputes, anything that could be used for blackmail or character assassination. He has files on everyone, including me. Financial records from my divorce, details about my consulting contracts, even personal communications with Pentagon contacts. William's prepared to destroy anyone who threatens his operation. Then how do we stop him? We get federal authorities involved before he can deploy his blackmail files. Once criminal investigators start asking questions, William's leverage becomes worthless. He can't blackmail federal agents. Patricia's plan was straightforward but risky. She'd contact her Pentagon procurement friends and request an immediate compliance audit of the North Star contract. Federal investigators would discover the specification violations and demand explanations. When William tried to blame me, we'd present evidence that destroyed their credibility completely. The timing was critical. William planned to announce Andrew's promotion to Chief Engineering Officer at next Tuesday's board meeting. That's when he'd also announce my reassignment to advisory status. Corporate speak for forced retirement. Let him make his move. Let Andrew present his fraudulent specifications in front of the entire board. Then we'll present evidence that destroys their credibility completely. I spent the weekend preparing. Tony provided copies of all surveillance logs and audio recordings Ashley had collected. I compiled side-by-side comparisons of original specifications versus Andrew's modifications for all 23 affected contract items. Most damaging was the recording of William and Andrew planning to frame me for their specification violations. Monday morning, William seemed unusually confident. He spent the day meeting privately with board members, presumably building support for Andrew's promotion. Ashley shadowed me constantly, attending meetings I hadn't invited her to and taking notes on every conversation. Around 3 p.m., Ashley approached me with a fake smile. "Michael, my grandfather wants to see you in his office. He mentioned something about finalizing transition plans." I walked into William's office to find him with Andrew and a man I didn't recognize wearing an FAA ID badge. "Michael, this is Inspector Williams from FAA Compliance Oversight. He has questions about our North Star contract specifications." My heart pounded, but I kept my expression neutral. This wasn't part of Patricia's plan. The audit wasn't supposed to start until after Tuesday's board meeting. Inspector Williams pulled out a folder. "Mr. Thompson, we've received reports of potential specification irregularities in your North Star contract submissions. Several items don't match our original procurement requirements. Can you explain these discrepancies?" I looked at the documents. They were Andrew's modified specifications with my name listed as the reviewing engineer. "Inspector, I never approved these specifications. These modifications violate both safety standards and contract requirements." Andrew jumped in immediately. "Michael, we discussed these efficiency improvements in multiple engineering review meetings. You signed off on all optimization measures. That's completely false. I specifically documented why these modifications would compromise equipment integrity and pilot safety." William leaned forward with practiced concern. "Inspector Williams, I believe we have a communication breakdown here. Michael has been resistant to modernization efforts, and there seems to be confusion about which specifications represent our official position." Inspector Williams looked between us carefully. "Who has final authority over engineering specifications in this company?" "Michael is our Chief Operations Manager," Williams said smoothly. "All technical decisions require his approval." Perfect trap. Either I accepted responsibility for Andrew's dangerous modifications, or I appeared incompetent before a federal inspector. William thought he'd cornered me completely, but I'd spent 12 years learning how to handle pressure, starting with combat situations in Afghanistan. You don't survive marine engineering without learning when to hold your ground. "Inspector Williams, I'd like to request a formal review of all engineering documentation. I believe there have been unauthorized changes to approved specifications, and I have evidence that proves systematic fraud." Williams' expression flickered for just a moment. "Michael, I don't think that's necessary. We can resolve any misunderstandings internally." Actually, Inspector Williams said, given the nature of these contracts and the seriousness of these allegations, a formal review is exactly what's required. The real battle was about to begin. What followed was 3 hours of controlled interrogation. Inspector Williams secured all computers and documentation while federal agents interviewed employees individually. William maintained his calm executive demeanor, but I noticed Andrew sweating through his expensive shirt. By 6 p.m., Inspector Williams had copies of every engineering report, email chain, and specification document from the past 10 months. More importantly, Tony had provided access to the surveillance logs and Ashley's audio recordings, evidence that would either support our case or destroy it completely. Mr. Thompson, we'll need your complete cooperation during this investigation. Please prepare all original documentation for review by our technical team tomorrow. After the federal agents left, William closed his office door and turned to me with barely controlled anger. Michael, you just made the biggest mistake of your career. This investigation will create problems for everyone, including you. The FAA doesn't appreciate contractors who can't manage their internal processes efficiently. The FAA appreciates contractors who don't commit fraud even less. You're walking a very dangerous line here. Andrew is family. I protect my family by any means necessary, and I protect my professional integrity and the pilots who depend on our equipment, including my son. That evening, Patricia called me at home. Michael, the investigation is proceeding faster than expected. Inspector Williams contacted FAA procurement directly. They're sending a full audit team tomorrow, and they want to interview you first thing in the morning. What about Williams' counterattack? He's already started. I received calls from 3 board members tonight asking about my confidence in your technical competence. Williams planting seeds of doubt about your mental stability and professional judgment. I wasn't surprised. Character assassination was his standard operating procedure. Tuesday morning arrived with unseasonable rain. The FAA audit team consisted of 4 technical specialists and 2 criminal investigators. They set up in our main conference room while employees whispered nervously throughout the building. At 10 a.m., William called the emergency board meeting that would determine everyone's fate. Ladies and gentlemen, we're facing an unfortunate situation created by miscommunication and resistance to necessary modernization efforts. William stood at the head of the boardroom table, projecting confidence despite the federal investigation happening down the hall. Andrew Blackstone has done exceptional work optimizing our processes and identifying cost savings across multiple contracts. Unfortunately, some senior staff have been resistant to these improvements. Andrew beamed from his seat beside the executive team, still believing his father could control the narrative. Before we discuss Andrew's promotion to Chief Engineering Officer, I want to address the federal investigation. This audit resulted from complaints by a disgruntled employee who disagreed with management decisions. Patricia spoke from across the table. William, are you referring to Michael Thompson's technical concerns about specification violations? I'm referring to Michael's inability to adapt to modern engineering practices and his attempts to undermine Andrew's legitimate improvements. Those aren't improvements, I said, standing up. They're dangerous modifications that violate federal contract terms and safety requirements. I connected my tablet to the room's display system. I believe this evidence will clarify the actual situation. What I showed them was devastating. Side-by-side comparisons of original specifications versus Andrew's modifications. Material strength reductions from 130,000 psi titanium to 45,000 psi aluminum. Eliminated safety tests. Compromised stress-resistance standards. Every change violated both contract requirements and basic engineering principles. These modifications were made without my approval and submitted to FAA procurement under my name as reviewing engineer. Andrew jumped up. Those are preliminary efficiency studies. Michael approved all final optimizations after our engineering reviews. Actually, I said, activating my phone's audio, that's not what you told your father. Andrew's voice filled the room. Dad, what happens if the FAA asks technical questions I can't answer? Then William's unmistakable voice. Don't worry, Andrew. I've already briefed them that Michael has been resistant to efficiency improvements. If there are technical issues, we'll frame them as his failure to provide adequate support. The room went completely silent. Board members stared at William in shock. Those recordings are illegal and taken out of context, William said, his composure finally cracking. No, said a voice from the back of the room. They're evidence of conspiracy to commit fraud. Inspector Williams walked in with 2 federal agents. We've completed our preliminary review. Mr. William Blackstone, Mr. Andrew Blackstone, and Ms. Ashley Blackstone, you're under arrest for conspiracy to defraud the United States government. What happened next was swift and decisive. Federal agents secured all company computers and phones. William and Andrew were handcuffed and escorted out while Ashley collapsed in her chair, finally understanding that Grandpa couldn't protect her from federal prosecutors. The charges were serious: conspiracy to defraud the government, falsifying federal contract specifications, and violations of the False Claims Act. The potential penalties included up to 20 years in federal prison and millions in fines. Patricia approached me as the agents finished collecting evidence. The board will need immediate leadership for the engineering department. Are you interested in the position you should have had years ago? 3 months later, I'm sitting in what used to be William's office reviewing specifications for upgraded stress testing equipment. The North Star contract was renegotiated with proper materials and realistic safety margins. Our engineering team expanded from 13 to 19 engineers, all hired based on competence rather than family connections. The investigation uncovered the full extent of the fraud. William had been systematically altering specifications across 8 different defense contracts over 18 months, claiming $28 million in fraudulent cost savings. The scheme wasn't just about the North Star contract. It was a pattern of criminal behavior designed to inflate profit margins at the expense of equipment safety. William pled guilty to federal fraud charges and received 6 years in federal prison plus $8.5 million in fines and restitution. Andrew was banned from government contracting permanently and faced multiple civil lawsuits from affected military units. Ashley lost her security clearance and accepted a plea deal for cooperation in exchange for 2 years probation. The real victory wasn't their punishment. It was rebuilding trust with FAA procurement and proving that experienced engineering judgment matters more than MBA cost optimization theories. Tony got promoted to senior union representative and implemented comprehensive worker protection protocols. We established a veteran preference hiring policy that gives priority to military veterans in technical positions. Patricia joined our board as chairman, ensuring proper executive oversight and maintaining her Pentagon connections. Most importantly, we now hire people who understand that aircraft components aren't about profit margins. They're about bringing pilots home alive. Every time I sign off on a specification now, I think about my son Danny working on those C-130s. The parts we build here might be the difference between his aircraft making it back to base or not. The aerospace industry is full of young MBAs who think they can optimize safety out of the equation. They don't understand that when you're building equipment for the military, you're not just dealing with numbers on a spreadsheet. You're dealing with somebody's son or daughter who's counting on that equipment to work when their life depends on it. If you've dealt with workplace nepotism or corrupt management, here's what I learned. Document everything. Every conversation, every email, every decision that seems wrong. Find allies who share your values, people who understand that doing the right thing matters more than keeping the boss happy. Build relationships with people who have influence outside your immediate chain of command. Patricia's Pentagon connections were what made the difference. Without her credibility and contacts, William might have succeeded in destroying my career and covering up the fraud. Most importantly, remember that sometimes fighting a broken system means taking risks that privileged kids will never understand. They've never had skin in the game. They've never had to worry about whether the equipment they approve will actually work when lives are on the line. Experience beats education when lives depend on your work. The classroom teaches you theories, but the real world teaches you consequences. When some kid fresh out of business school starts talking about cutting corners on safety protocols, remember that every shortcut they take is a risk they're forcing someone else to bear. William thought family connections and surveillance files could overcome basic physics and federal law. He was wrong. Andrew thought an MBA could substitute for 22 years of hands-on engineering experience. He was wrong too. In the end, the truth has a way of coming out. Titanium is stronger than aluminum. Experience matters more than connections. And integrity beats corruption every time, as long as you're willing to fight for it. That's my story. Michael Thompson, Senior Vice President of Engineering, Apex Defense Technologies. Still here, still fighting for quality over shortcuts, still making sure our equipment works when it matters most. And every day, I'm grateful that my son Danny gets to fly an aircraft built by people who understand that safety isn't negotiable. The Blackstone family learned that the hard way. Some lessons cost more than others.